Hi, folks. Welcome to Just the Facts, Maam, with Charles Butler. I've been off the air for a while, trying to get well. I had a few health issues, but I'm doing better now. And because of that, I'm back to reading, writing, and just participating again. Sorry about the shirt. Hey, wanted to talk a little bit today about the South African refugees, the 59 that President Trump allowed into the country. From what I understand, there are about 70,000 South Africans that are interested in coming to America. We have enough racists here already. We don't need any more. And I'm going to tell you from personal experience. When they switched the governments back in the 80s, 86, I guess, a number of South Africans moved to San Diego because San Diego has the same climate as Cape Town. So you had all these people there speaking Afrikanese, and they were Afrikaners, clearly, and they spoke Afrikanese, whatever they call that language. And they were proud of it. I remember a guy called me a gaffer, thinking that I didn't know what that meant, and punched him right in the face. So I don't know if this is good or bad, but I'm going to give you some history and let you decide for yourself. This land reparation issue has been an issue for a very long time. President Ramaphosa, a South African president, no one's interviewed him. You haven't heard from the South African side. All you hear about is, the poor Afrikaners, it's genocide. Well, everybody's concluded, everyone that's credible, has concluded that there is not genocide in South Africa against white farmers or anyone else. I think that's part of the problem, but it's neither here nor there. But the reality is Trump and Elon Musk are lying about genocide being perpetrated against these white farmers. In fact, the South Africans, I think, have been very patient in not attacking and killing white South Africans, given what they've gone through. The brutality of apartheid, and America supported it. So let's be clear. I remember reading an article in 1973 at the University of Michigan, and Henry Kissinger said, well, we must support the South African regime because they provide us titanium for the F-16 and the F-15. I was in our OTC when I read this madness, and I'm thinking to myself, well, whose side are you on? I mean, these people are being shot in the back, running away from the South African government troops, and being shot in the back, literally. Just look up Soweto. Look it up. Google it or DuckDuckGo it. I would rather you DuckDuckGo it because they kind of get to the truth. Or you could go to Google Scholar. These people were being shot in the back with 50 caliber machine guns, men, women, children. Didn't make any difference. Did the world extend refugee status to them? No, it did not. It still hasn't. We can talk about real genocide in the Sudan. Now, in the Sudan, they have real genocide. But I'm not going to get into that today. But President Ramaphosa of South Africa, he called a group of 59 South Africans who moved to the U.S. to resettle cowards. That's what he called them, not me. And he said they will be back soon. So we get these people on Monday, and Ramaphosa said the people who left were not happy with the efforts to address the inequities of the apartheid past, terming their relocation a sad moment for them. He says, South Africans, we are resilient. We don't run away from our problems. We must stay here and solve our problems. Well, let me just say this about that. Mandela and Botha, just to give you a little history, so that most people don't know this, because, if it's not in the media, the American media, we don't look at it. And the American media is very misinformation oriented, disinformation oriented, and not very informational at all, to tell you the truth. They do a lot of sensationalism. But President Botha and Mandela got together, and as they were deciding how to transition these governments, land reparations certainly was a major issue for them. And how do you do it? How do you do it without destabilizing the political and economic stability of the country? So they decided that they would leave things in place the way they were, and that the next president after Mandela would settle that issue. That didn't happen. And I can't remember his name now. I think it started with an M though. But then we got Zuma, and Zuma was certainly crazy, really a crazy guy. He didn't believe that AIDS existed. As a lot of African countries do, we know AIDS is real. But the South African farmers who came to America, they said that they came because in January, President Ramaphosa signed a controversial law allowing the government to seize property, privately owned property, let's be clear, privately owned property without compensation in certain circumstances, when it is deemed equitable and in the public interest. But the government says that no land has been taken yet under the act. That's what the South African government says. So Elon Musk and his disagreement with South Africa is over Starlink, and they won't let him put Starlink in South Africa, which is a very key point when you got these satellites circling the country. And see, Africa's about 3 or 4 times bigger than is portrayed on Magellan map. I don't know if you know that or not, but the African continent would take over 3 times the United States in terms of land mass, South Africa. So it's amazing how big it is. And they have 54 countries. So when I hear people say, well, I'm going to Africa. Well, where are you going? That's like saying, well, I'm going to the United States. Okay. Where are you going? New York, Maryland, Michigan, Illinois, Florida. Where are you going? Well, I'm going to Africa. Well, are you going to Gambia, Nigeria, Ghana, Somalia, Egypt? Where are you going? So Trump has offered to resettle these people who are descendants of Dutch settlers, and we know who they were. But speaking on Monday at an agricultural exhibition in the Free Press in the Free State province, Ramaphosa said that Afrikaners were moving to the U.S. because they were not favorably disposed to the efforts aimed at addressing the country's challenges. If you look at all the national groups in our country, black and white, they stayed in this country because it's our country, and we must not run away from our problems, and we must stay here and solve our problems. That's what Ramaphosa says. We're not going to give up. We're not going to run away. That's just a little backdrop of what's going on with these refugees. The other thing that I just want to point out is that South Africa is the only country on the continent where colonizers came to stay and were never driven out of our country, dismissing the claims that Afrikaners are being persecuted. Ramaphosa said dozens of white South Africans who arrived in the U.S. on Monday do not fit the bill for refugees. And a number of people are claiming that. I claim that. They don't fit the bill for refugees. According to the U.S. Embassy in South Africa, to be considered eligible for refugee resettlement, someone must be of South African nationality, an Afrikaner, or from a racial minority, white folks in the minority, but they owned almost 90% of the land. Okay, and we'll get into that in a minute. Able to cite an incident or past persecution or fear of persecution in the future. The African leader said he was due to meet with his U.S. counterpart on regarding the issue, and Trump has threatened to boycott the forthcoming G20 summit in South Africa unless the situation is taken care of. Well, that ain't gonna happen. You gotta go to G20. It's too much work to be done. Okay, and this is just a flash in the pan. These South African farmers. So let's get into this so that you have some background and some history that you can share, and so you'll understand that this problem didn't just start. This has been a problem in South Africa since the transition of the government. As I said before, 87% of the farmland was owned by white Afrikaners. Now, this is what you need to understand also, and I'm going to make a point of this as we go forward. Those dairy farms, those agricultural farms, were planted by the government and given to these white South African farmers. I mean, just do a little homework. You'll find they say, well, the government gave me this dairy farm, and I didn't know any people had this land before, and because these people, after the apartheid ended, they came back to their tribal lands, and people are, I didn't know if these were tribal lands. The government just gave me this dairy farm. Compensation? Well, let's talk about that. But under apartheid, the 1913 Native Land Act and other laws restricted Black Africans from owning land, limiting them to just 7% of the land, despite being the vast majority. Now, in 1994, when Mandela became president, 1994, I said 86, but 94, land inequity was one of the most important visible legacies of apartheid. Okay? Now, why did we know that here in America? Why did we talk about that here in America? We just talk about, free Mandela, free Mandela, free Mandela. But Mandela had work to do. And that work wasn't necessarily being done the way it was supposed to be done. See if I'm still charging here. Hold on. Let's see. Yeah, I'm still charging. Okay. So, but Mandela's position was pretty cool. He said he wanted to pursue this land transfer in a restorative manner, not a radical manner, as Mobutu did in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. He just went in and took white folks' land and, pushed them out and told them to get out of the country. And in doing that, they went from being the most prosperous, the most well-fed, the biggest breadbasket in Africa, to the worst, because these people didn't know how to run farms that he gave them to. They were all political cronies and guys who didn't get their hands dirty. They didn't know how to run a farm. So mistake, big mistake, but mistake. But Mandela, on the other hand, supported land reform as part of a broader effort to correct apartheid injustices. And he did not support aggressive land seizures or uncompensated redistribution. Then they came up with this thing called willing seller, willing buyer. And his government adopted a market-based approach to meaning landowners had to be willing to sell, and the state would purchase the land and distribute it to the landless, Black folks. Reconciliation focus. Mandela prioritized national unity and racial reconciliation. He feared that rapid or forced land redistribution would destabilize the government, economy, and society. He was right, no question. The challenges, though, were the market driven model was slow and it was very costly, and progress during Mandela's presidency was limited. Many criticized the policy for being too conservative and leaving deep structural inequities in land ownership largely intact. In essence, he didn't move much land to black folks, but he couldn't. I mean, like I said, he was leaving that for the next president to do. The legacy that he left behind, though, was his approach to land redistribution in South Africa was shaped by the need to balance justice for the dispossessed with the need for political and economic stability. In the historical context, under apartheid, the 1913 Native Lands Act and other laws restricted black South Africans from owning land, limited just 7% of the land. By 1994, when Mandela became president, land inequity was one of the most visible legacies of apartheid. Interesting, eh? So he had a hard time, and this is was a very difficult issue. But he got it. He did what he had to do. But land, like I said, Zuma, what a waste of time and talent. Okay, but Mandela's presidency marked a turning point in South Africa's history. We know that. Besides eliminating apartheid, he especially addressed the deep root causes of injustices that were caused by apartheid. One of the most pressing issues facing his administration was land redistribution, a complex and emotionally charged problem stemming from centuries of racial discriminatory practices. Under apartheid, black South Africans were systematically dispossessed of their land through laws such as the 1913 Native Land Act, and by the time Mandela became president in 1994, the vast majority of that land was owned by white people. Mandela's emphasis was on peace and stability and widely praised. The market-driven model was slow and often ineffective, without question. Progress in redistribution was far enough to dismantle the structural inequities. Nevertheless, Mandela believed that any land reform process must respect the rule of law and avoid economic and social upheaval that could result in forced seizures. Mandela's legacy on redistribution is thus one of cautious reform. He laid the groundwork for a peaceful transition and planted the seeds of redress. But the challenge of total equitable land ownership was left for future generations to resolve. The land issue remains a central and unresolved debate in South African politics. Let's be very clear about that. Nelson Mandela's approach to redistribution has shaped the imbalance. So that's where we are today. That this issue, one of the deals was with the government is that they had a fund to buy land from the farmers, and when the money ran out of the fund, that's when they started seizing farms without paying the farmers. But before that, the white farmers were getting fair market value for the property, while the settlers were getting a settlement value, which is far much lower than the fair market value paid to the white farmers. So these are all things that you can find online. I have my sources, and I put together, I put together 4 or 5 different sources, but I already knew a lot of this stuff. So when you read the headlines and you look at TV and they go, "Oh my God, they're running from genocide, they're running from," no, that's not the case. I remember very clearly President Botha and Reverend, his name was Botha, something like that, light-skinned black man. We were in Los Angeles, and they were talking about how they needed weapons. They needed money for weapons for the ANC and this. Because, see, the ANC was supposed to be a terrorist organization, but they never killed any white folks. It wasn't only until after Botha and Tutu made the visit to America, basically like the IRA, Irish Republican Army, soliciting money for their cause, which was guns and bullets and and upheaval. So let's be clear, this is nothing new. And I happened to be in one of these meetings, and somebody asked, "Well, how many white people have you killed so far?" And Minister Reverend Tutu at that time said, "Well, none, of course." He said, "Well, look, until you start killing white people, they're not going to pay you any attention." So what happened was they went back to South Africa. A couple of cafes exploded, killed 2 or 3 people here, killed 2 or 3 people there. And the whole country changed in terms of the brutality against black folks, because black folks were tired of it. So that, I have this saying, and you'll hear me say this time and time again, and that's that some people respect the law, some people respect a decent conversation, but everybody respects the gun. It's true. Hey, look, I hope that I was able to shed a little light on this situation about genocide in South Africa, because there is none against white people or black people. And that this land redistribution has been an issue facing the South African people since 1913. Can you imagine being in your own country and not being allowed to own land? Can you imagine being on your family plot? Say it's 10,000 acres or more. And people tell you that this is not yours. We're taking this because you're black. That's what they did. And I know if this story is told to the American people, that they would have a different outlook and a certain balance about what they're hearing from Trump and Elon Musk. I don't think we should let any more South African refugees into our country, even though, like I said before, 70,000 are interested. It's just more racist to deal with, just like these Latinos. They're racist as hell. They're racist against black folks. They're racist against white folks. They want to do Latin. And I'm like, I don't know. You can't even win soccer matches, dude. Well, how you going to fight? You have a piss poor army. Why do we need you? Anyway, those are just some of the things to think about and do some research, some homework on, so that you have a better understanding of what's going on in the world today. The world is always changing. It's very dynamic. And if you're not on top of it, it's on top of you. So when we go out and talk about these things, we shouldn't speak about them from emotion without having facts to back up that emotion. And it's okay to be emotional as long as you understand the truth. If people can get very emotional about people facing genocide, but it's not true. So we have to redirect that energy to seeking the truth. And that's what we try to do here at Just the Facts, Maam, is to address the truth. You'll never hear me say anything or do anything without having done my homework. And with that said, we're going to sign off. And we're going to kick off the real show probably next week. But we're just having fun. I just wanted to bring that to folks' attention because I think it needed to be. Now, you take care. Tell your friends about the show, the Charles Butler. And I'm not the gay guy. I'm not the faggot guy. That's not me, from Chicago. My show's called Charles Butler Talk Show, or you could check the Reality Check or Just the Facts, Maam. Okay? Have a good evening.